Yeah, he did it. Gave him. You forgot to
I
put
always
your.
thought he was doing it by accident, but I think
No.
he might not be doing it on purpose.
Gave him the.
Well,
Yeah.
Will, do you got to study? You got to study to prove that he did that?
Uh,
Doing it
no,
right
you
now.
didn't see it.
I mean,
Mr. Parker, are you Godless Galaxy from a
Yeah.
year ago? What's
yeah.
that?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it's good to see you guys. So have you figured out a solution to genetic degeneration, mutation accumulation yet? Have you looked into it? It's been a couple of years now, so.
Yeah, I haven't really much looked into it because I think you guys are just lying about it and whatnot.
Oh, just lying of okay.
Yeah, but not
so-
even looking at it. Yeah.
I've looked into it.
Or I'm
I
gonna
mean,
show
And what did you
Well-
find? Have you discovered any type of selective mechanism that can remove these mutations that are effectively neutral?
I mean, when I read the studies you give me, they're usually not telling me what you're telling me.
Can
Is
you
there
provide Can you
Um,
provide an example of a study I've given you that you that I misrepresented off the top of your head?
Modern day debate. I asked you for a study about genetic destruction or whatever, and you give me one. It talks about the Y chromosome. Like you said, the whole this is the rate of decay for the genome, and then the study you give me was about the Y chromosome, and even that was just very strange. And I'm like, this doesn't even talk about anything about degrading. It only talks about the Y chromosome. And then your response was, that's only a bigger problem for you. And I'm like, but like, your study doesn't do anything.
Okay, so two questions. Do you disagree with the fact that we accumulate roughly 60 to 100 de novo mutations per person per generation? Do you disagree with that?
I don't really trust you, so I sure, maybe they are.
Well, this is just kind of generally known. I mean, I've debated PhDs on this where they recognize that fact. I can pull up a source just to show you on that, just to show you proof on that. And would you disagree that the Y chromosome is accumulating mutations quite rapidly now? It's a fast mutating DNA compartment. Would you disagree with that?
I mean, I would have to see evidence showing that it's rapidly degrading.
Did you know that the Y chromosome in humans and the Y chromosome in chimpanzees is less than 70% dissimilar?
No.
You're not familiar with, have you done much study in the last couple of years?
No, I've been mostly focusing on politics and physics, not biology and genetics.
So if we're just dumb, uninformed creationists who make our living lying, how do you explain the fact that chimpanzees, who are supposed to be our closest cousin, right? We split from a common ancestor with the chimpanzee roughly 6 million years ago. How do you explain the fact that our Y chromosomes, which are essentially non-recombining DNA, they should generally be quite stable? How do you explain the fact that it's so different? Less than 70% dissimilar if you consider overall architecture and I'm going to pull up the paper just to show you.
Okay.
Just so you don't think I'm lying or anything. But while I'm pulling it up, how would you, at the top of your head, I guess using some critical thinking skills, how would you explain such massive dissimilarity between apparently our closest cousin?
Well, it would, okay, I think the problem would be to figure out how we're assessing the overall genome of the Y chromosome itself and how we're determining it being degrading. Because
I'm not saying.
I mean, there has to be a
ahead.
widespread study about the Y chromosome in multiple people to assess that it is degrading at a certain rate.
So right here, are you familiar with this paper? Chimpanzee and human Y chromosomes are remarkably divergent in structure and gene content. This is coming from a secular source right down here. More than 30% of the chimp Y chromosome lacks an alignable counterpart on the human Y chromosome and vice versa. Page's team found that chimp Y chromosome has only 2/3 as many distinct genes or gene families as the human Y chromosome and only 47% as many protein coding elements. So when you actually consider all size differences, architecture, gene content, it's less than 35% dissimilar.
Hold on.
Y chromosome.
I'm gonna have to look at the study exactly because that's just you pulling stuff from it. So,
Well, they've had further studies where they've come up with solutions. For example, some evolutionists are saying that the Y chromosome is rapidly changing, rapidly evolving. That's why it's been able to accumulate so much differences in that time frame since the split. Would you say that that's a valid explanation?
I mean, it's a possibility. I don't know genetics that well.
But here's the thing. You said I was a liar to say that the Y chromosome is rapidly accumulating mutations, apparently, by the source I provided you. So now you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because in order to explain the differences, okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
The study you gave me was about a study about a family in China or something, and like it was studying the Y chromosomes between a father, his grandfather, and his like uncle and cousin or whatever. And I'm like, this isn't really that conclusive about things.
I believe that was a Y chromosome pedigree study in Icelanders, I believe.
Maybe.
Right. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. These are things you should consider, Mr. Parker. If you're going to hold to universal common ancestry, okay, then you're going to need to deal with the problem of mutation accumulation, the fact that population geneticists do acknowledge that mutations are accumulating far too quickly for selection to filter out such mutations. This is recognized. So when you just say creationists are liars, you clearly are not up to date with the literature, or else population geneticists wouldn't be coming up with mechanisms such as synergistic epistasis, mutation count mechanism, because if genetic entropy doesn't exist, or there's no problem, then why are population geneticists who aren't young earth creationists, why are they putting forth models to explain away the problem or to solve the problem that you say doesn't exist? And two, you are going to have to explain, if you believe that humans and chimpanzees are related through common ancestry, you are going to explain why their Y chromosomes are so vastly different, less than 35% dissimilar, and apparently the chimpanzee is our closest cousin. So my point is, these are questions you're going to have to deal with, questions you're going to have to answer if these are the beliefs and the model ultimately of universal common ancestry that you hold to. So I would just say look into it, at least.
I was going to point out, SFT, did you guys know that Iceland still has a state church?
Really?
Yeah. Everybody keeps telling me Iceland and Norway, all these places that have these wonderful secular, socialist, whatever. There's still theocracy today.
Hey, Parker, I have a question for you. Can you see the live chat? If I post a link in there right now, would you be able to get it?
Yeah.
All right, take it. I just put a link in the live chat on YouTube. Just click on that real quick and let me know if you see it. Can you open that link?
Yeah, I can open it, but there's hold on.
And so where does that link to? That's not a creation source, right?
Okay.
That linked to a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's nih.gov.
Yeah.
And do you see what it says if you scroll down just a tiny bit? It says those are all genetic diseases, and they're all in alphabetical order for you. And you can scroll right on down that long list. And I'm just wondering, because they're adding to this list regularly. And so if natural selection works and the human genome is not breaking down, then how do you explain this growing long list? That's a fair question. So if you want to deny genetic entropy or genomic degradation, then can you just respond to that?
And I just want to point out one thing before you do, Mr. Parker, and do so, take as much time as you need. Don't read through the source like this guy on the screen, because oftentimes this is how evolutionists read through sources and citations that we provide them, especially creationist papers. They make the mistake. It's a very, very bad mistake of putting a blindfold over their eyes when they read these papers. So That could be why they're coming to the incorrect conclusion. So just make sure, Mr. Parker. Anyways, yeah, how would you explain the rapid accumulation of new genetic related diseases every single year being added to the genetic database that Sam pointed to?
Okay, so I'm currently looking at the one study you put it in your presentation you showed me.
Well, what about the one that I posted?
I'm
Because
getting
that
to
one's
that.
not. That's
Calm
one
down.
that everyone can
Calm
understand.
down. I'm getting to that.
Oh,
Let me talk. The explanation for this is that as science develops and we're able to learn and assess different genetic problems, we're able to discover and root to many common diseases we find today. That's just more disease. Like, it's not
So
like,
there's
oh
more- so
shoot,
they're
this
growing?
new kid, like this newborn kid just has
Wait, Parker, back up. I'm not trying to interrupt you. I just want to clarify. So you just literally said the new genetic diseases that we're finding today. Those are new diseases.
Yes.
Do you understand? So that we're adding.
It's not like new in the sense like, oh,
No, they are.
What do you mean?
They are new. Like that, we are finding new diseases regularly, adding them to that list. Currently, there's between 6,000 and 7,000 genetic related. I had a link. They took it down from the World Health Organization that said 10,000. So the only link that I can provide right now on the spot is one that says 6,000 to 7,000. So that's fine. But so now you have 6,000 to 7,000 genetic related diseases, and they're growing. The list is growing, just as you said. So I'm asking you, how
is that because of science developing and assessing that these are?
Well, let me ask you this: do we have medicine? Are we making medical advances too? So not only are the list of diseases growing, what would happen if we were to lose human medical intervention? What would happen? Would we be better off or worse off? Do you understand my question? It's really simple. Like, if we didn't have medicine, what would happen to us?
We wouldn't. Millions of people will die due to medicine. Like,
due to what? No. The medicine is not the problem. The medicine is part of the solution. What's the problem? The problem is what?
Genetics, I guess, or in like other
diseases
that exist in the world.
So you just so how do you deny these diseases and this accumulation of diseases? How do you deny the human genome is breaking down, but then acknowledge it?
You're trying to assess the idea that all these genetic diseases must be fatal. If they're extremely fatal,
no, they don't have to be fatal.
Okay, so then what's the exact?
Do they have to be fatal? Why do they have to be fatal? I mean, can we just?
I mean, you're making it sound like without, like in a couple of years without medicine, we would all die. That's what I'm getting the gist of a little bit from you. That's where
I guess you can define a couple of years, but let's say we removed medicine right now. What would happen?
People wouldn't get their medicine, like insulin, and would die.
And why do they need insulin?
Because they have diabetes.
And what's that a result of?
It's genetic entropy.
No, it's complex factors.
How can you look at this list of genetic? It literally says right on it, genetic related diseases. That's growing. How can you look at that list and still be?
Would you agree, Mr. Parker, Mr. Peter Parker? Would you admit that these genetic related diseases due to mutations are due to mutations?
Yes.
Okay. But yeah, you want to say that mutations are the destroyer. And I'm going to bury your point right here. So if you just did a little bit of research, the human germline mutation rate, are you familiar with who Michael Lynch is? Not a young earth creationist.
No, I'm not. Like I said earlier, I'm more interested in politics and physics, not genetics. So
yeah, but you're the one who accused. Yeah, but you're the one who accused me of lying earlier. So here we go. De novo mutations. On average, newborns contain 100 de novo mutations. See, here's why when I typically debate informed evolutionists, they don't waste time, asking for studies on things that are just generally well known and accepted now. Typically bogs down the the discussion. But here's the thing. Okay, so here's the source. Roughly 100 new mutations per person per generation. You can find other ones that, and it even says here, although the human germline mutation rate is higher than that in any other well-studied species, and then you can read through it and find out about effective population size, effective genome size. But here's the thing: the mutation, the disease database that Sam is showing you, you would agree that those are due to mutations. And the whole point of genetic entropy is basically that mutations are accumulating far too quickly and in far too many for selection to be able to filter out those mutations. And if we can now agree, now that I've showed you the source, that we accumulate roughly 100 new mutations per person per generation, most of those being what population geneticists consider effectively neutral, too subtle to the organism's phenotype and genotype to be selected for or against, they build up from generation to generation. And that's why we have currently, genetic entropy on so many levels, all these mutation-related diseases. Now we see epigenetic as well related genetic degeneration. I mean, autism clearly has a genetic component, cancer skyrocketing, immunological disorders, autoimmune diseases. Cancer is what, 1 in 3 now? I mean, these things can't be denied, most of them being mutation related. So the basic question. So, Mr. Parker, just take as much time as you need now that you've seen that we accumulate roughly 100 new mutations. Sam provided you a wonderful source about how mutations impact our genetics, especially when it comes to disease. You know, it breaks us down. It's the destroyer, not the creator. So how do you solve this problem? What's your answer to it ultimately, Mr. Parker?
Well, and especially given in light, we don't have any positive evidence of mutations creating new species.
Right. Boom. Another good point. So how would you address that, Mr. Parker?
So the whole point of me bringing up the idea that, medicine and science is discovering new diseases is that we're calibrating our assessment of what qualifies as disease and going over things that we didn't discover earlier. So, I mean,
Papa Bowie.
No, that's not accurate, Parker. It's not that we didn't discover them earlier. It's that people are getting diseases and they need medicine to keep them alive. It's not like, oh, wow, I didn't realize this.
The rate of
like they would have died.
Okay, if we have like a graph of the diagnosis of cancer patients, is that similar to that of the advancement of technology in assessing cancer? Or
Jake, Parker, look at that list. It's not just cancer.
I know, but it's wrong. Would you agree that we are making new scientific equipment that can identify these new diseases?
Mr. Parker, okay.
Why do we need to identify the disease? The diseases is the point.
And the diseases are on the rise. So for example, however many years ago, 50 years ago, autism, for example, or a lot of these autoimmune diseases, they were like 1 in 50. Now it's like 1 in
because we were able
under
to
10.
identify it much easier.
Yeah, exactly. And that's your argument. But here's the thing. That's false. No, I'm going to tell you why it's false. It's false because if that's the case, and it's truly always been 1 in a few, 1 in 10, whatever the number is now. Yes. 1 in 50 autism used to be way more rare, but you're saying that now they're identifying it better. Where's all the 50, 60, 70-year-old autistic people walking around, or 50, 60, 70-year-old people walking around with all these undiagnosed autoimmune diseases that you say have just gone undetected all of these years?
I mean, that's a hard thing for me to pull out right now. I would say. So you're asking me why we don't find old people with autism?
Well, if supposedly it's always been this common, then we should be seeing a lot more people, especially of the older generation, walking around with this now suddenly diagnosed with it.
Okay, especially since autism is generally diagnosed at birth or near birth.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah. So
I mean, I don't know the exact study on old people getting tested for autism or getting medical assessments of that, especially older generations. Because, I mean, if we go back, in the 60s or whatever, and check at how they assess people with autism, it would be the more obvious characteristics of autism on the other ends of the spectrums that are quite distinguishable. And nowadays we know it's a spectrum, and so there's a very wide range. And I would find it hard to believe that with this new discovery that a lot of older people are going out of their way to get these assessments to see if they have if they're on the spectrum. Like if you can show me a graph of older people having, I don't know, I think you guys are just trying to like say like, well, actually, if you just completely avoid your point about new science being invented, assessing different standards of things, then yeah, our point makes perfect sense. But like, if say our science wasn't, let's say our science was 50% effective at identifying a certain disease, and then in 50 years we're able to make it 100% effective in determining this disease, you would expect there to be a lot less cases now than in the future because you would have better assessment of that disease, correct?
I got a website I'm trying to share if this helps.
Oh yeah, here, one sec.
Is in the
Go ahead, Joel.
True. Yeah, this is just fairly recent.
I'm in a full screen there.
It's showing part of your point, Mr. Parker, how there are an increase of sites reporting, but even when they become kind of static, I guess in the last decade or so, we're still seeing an increase in autism.
Oh yeah, look at that, 1 in 50. Now, what's that, Joel? 1 in 54 down at see 1 in 50.
So even though the sites are stabilizing, the number of testing going on in the spectrum that you were describing, we're still seeing an increase in autism rates.
Well, let me ask you a question, Mr. Parker. I'm not sure if you're familiar with geneticist Dr. John Sanford, who recently spoke at NIH, National Institute for Health, on human genetic degeneration. Okay, and the National Institute of Health is not a young Earth creationist organization. I think you knew that. And he spoke a great deal about the problems associated with mutation accumulation and the increase in mutation-related diseases that we're now seeing. It's a pandemic. It's genetic degeneration on all levels, even epigenetic he was talking about. And this is a burden and a problem that people at the NIH are looking to find solutions for. But here's the point. You seem to be denying this. I mean, have you watched that lecture recently? Are you up to date on all of this? What you're saying here is just not accepted. It's just not demonstrable. I mean, diseases are on the rise. And here's the thing. Any new diseases that they're now better able to detect due to medical advancement only adds even more that aren't undetected. Everybody knows a person who has a problem that they go to the doctor for, and the doctor can't figure it out. Everybody.
I think a lot of these people are older. I know about my friend's mom. She was on antidepressants for a long time. I think a lot of these antidepressants can cause brain damage. I know for a fact. Like it seems like, well, I don't know for a fact, but I mean, like a majority of people that I know that have family members that have are dealing with any kind of problems with their brain right now, or either on like anti-anxiety meds or SSR. You know what I mean? Because it just seems to be pretty. I've did just a local study on, like, I've seen a rise in brain cancer too, and my uncle, his high school sweetheart died, and then his mother of his daughter died like within a few days of each other, brain cancer, and then like a week later, my buddy, his mom died of brain cancer, and it's just like my brother-in-law's sister died of brain cancer. This is all in the same year, man. It's just like brain cancer. And I don't see like anything going up in the studies, but it's like, I don't know if it's caught up yet because like these people are dying fast.
And that being said, great point, Chris. Alzheimer's, dementia, these are on the rise. Okay, people describe it as a pandemic. Entropic degeneration on all levels. Asthma, autoimmune diseases, cancers, immunological diseases, brain disorders, like Chris is saying, and a lot of it's environmental related, right? They typically say that genetics plus environment equals phenotype, because environment has a huge part to play in it.
Mhm.
People that are smoking or a lot of these drugs, they can result in disease, defects in our genetics that can also be passed on to
and switch on, like
offspring.
epigenetics, switch on some of these things that.
That's right.
That.
So how do you deal with all of that, Mr. Peter Parker?
I mean, I would have to do more research, but I'm just generally making the idea that I personally don't believe you guys are being honest about your
That's not a goal.
Huh?
Well, Mr. Parker, you just said that I wasn't being honest about the 100 new mutations per person per generation, and I just showed you a source from Michael Lynch himself, famous population geneticist, a leading population geneticist, and even he's acknowledging that human genetic degeneration.
Well,
but I'm a liar, apparently.
It's almost, the studies I've seen.
You call him a liar?
Mr. Parker.
Turn down for what?
I just pulled up something. Mr. Parker, so read this. Okay, so now that I showed you from the source itself, deal with this. A new paper, Lynch 2016, that's the one I showed you, written by a leading population geneticist, shows that the human genetic degeneration is a very serious problem. He affirms that the human germline mutation rate is roughly 100 new mutations per person per generation. I'm not making this stuff up. While the somatic mutation rate is roughly 3 new mutations per person per generation. Lynch estimates human fitness is declining 1 to 5% per generation, and he adds, most mutations have minor effects. Remember when I was saying that? Most mutations are too subtle to fitness, that they are only affected by what? Genetic drift. Selection can't see them, which means selection can't do anything about them, can't remove them. So here we go. Most mutations have minor effects. Very few have lethal consequences. Yeah, selection is going to get rid of the worst. We agree with that. And even fewer are beneficial, coming from a leading population geneticist. So this is the data, Mr. Parker. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it? Other than saying that we're just lying. I mean, the data's here.
Yeah, and the data's showing that
deal
the
with it.
so-called neutral mutations are really not neutral. You know what I mean?
The papers are lying, everyone. It's creationist homemade. We just made up those paper, bro.
I would have to read
It's a
this.
conspiracy.
Please don't take it.
Guys, let's give Mr. Parker equal time to make his case.
True,
I'm going to say
true.
screen share. Mr. Parker, it's right here. You can read it. I've already showed you the source.
Yeah, okay.
The Lynch
I
source.
can read it, like, right
As your
now.
attorney, though, I advise you that you can always invoke your right to not fall for that trap.
Yeah, you can pull a Todd and just say that you don't want to fall for that trap. But so here's the thing:
I'm
what
not falling
type
for
of
that trap.
so what type of selection, Mr. Parker? And then we're just going to be silent and let you deal with it. Which type of selection can remove those mutations that, as is stated here, have such minor effects, like a typographical error in a text? They can't be seen by selection, and they accumulate. They're passed on from generation to generation. Go ahead. What's your solution to this?
I would have to do more reading on the studies that you're presenting to me and assess if what you're stating about them is true. And then I would have to do more research about genetics in general. I mostly read politics and physics. I don't do much genetic reading. I haven't done any in quite a while. So, I understand some of what you're talking about, but I don't have any of the research done exactly because I didn't come here with 50 papers ready to argue this against you. I was more intrigued about what Joel and the guy with the ape profile said about homosexuality.
Sorry, it's real quick. It's not an ape profile. It's my grandpa.
Okay.
Thought that was your monkey's uncle.
Yeah, aren't you related to the chimpanzees and pine trees, bananas?
You see, I personally believe I come from a kangaroo. I don't believe I evolved from a monkey.
And I just want to point out too, for argument's sake, because Mr. Parker, I wouldn't bombard you with these things if we did not have several debates on this. Because your YouTube name used to be Godless Galaxy. We debated on Modern Day Debate, and you kind of doubled down and went into full damage control mode after those debates, saying that my sources are not saying what I'm saying they're saying, or I'm lying, kind of as you said here. But as we can see, this is typical of the evolutionists, where I guess they're just not interested to, because I think when you do, as an evolutionist, when you do go further study this data, like we're suggesting, that's when you're going to realize, like, wow, I'm really not related to a banana plant. But here's the thing: a lot of evolutionists, they don't want to go down that deep, because then it's gonna hurt your worldview, and it's gonna force you to reconsider your position of bananas and whales being related. So so you've had, I mean, a year or two to look into it, and you said you haven't, and that's fine, but that's typical of the evolutionists. They get demolished in debate, and then they don't go prove themselves, I guess. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, after the debates, I really didn't interact with you after those, really, and I did a little bit more research, but like I didn't really care that much because I went into physics more or less because of the flood or whatever. But like, I mean, and then I delve into some other subject. It's been more than a year, I think. So like, yeah, I've had my own. I've been doing my own thing for quite a while.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. But here's the thing, one of the most important questions that everybody should have is where did we come from? It's either created or evolved. Now, the empirical data that we talk about, modern scientific data shows that no, we could not have evolved in the sense of universal common ancestry, right? From a single-celled ancestor to a multi-celled ancestor to a fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal, monkey.
Have you ever considered a situation with some invertebrate species like horseshoe crabs that have been around for a long time into the geological record? How does a species like that continue to exist?
It's really a great question. Kondrashov actually talks about that. He said these lineages should have a lifespan limit. And so one author I didn't include was Dr. Fred Hoyle, a famous physicist. He actually was so interested in this that he spent a few years of his life looking at the mathematics of evolution. And he concluded DNA is degrading, and he said any given piece of DNA has a limited shelf life, basically. And so he envisioned aliens coming and reseeding the planet periodically to make up for all the degenerated genome. So, so really, it's hard to imagine deep time lineages surviving unchanged like the horseshoe crab. It's really a conceptual hurdle. And it's, I think, should be acknowledged widely that how if current so one really interesting thing, jumping to the virus issue, is we watched the H1N1 virus go from a red hot pandemic to a whimper to an extinction event in 90 years. There's a paper recently published that say that all RNA viruses of all different families appear to be evolutionarily young, meaning tens of thousands of years old, whereas you'd think that viruses would date back to millions or billions of years ago. This is our numerical simulation. Mutation goes up perfectly linearly, and fitness goes down with a fitness decline curve. And this is the influenza study that we did. Rob gathered sequence data going back to the 30s, and what he sees is a strict linear accumulation, just in the same way. So basically, it's clock-like. 10% of the H1N1 influenza virus mutated. And so this is genetic entropy at work, and it's supported by other people who have been following H1N1's virulence, and they show that the decline since again records were being kept, or actually since the 1918 influenza, is that the virulence declined in the same type of way that that we see in our simulations, to the point where in 2009, that human version of H1N1, there's still H1N1 circulating that's swine flu, but H1N1 went extinct in 2009. So that's clearly indicating that this is not neutral or adaptive. This is genetic entropy at work in a biological system where we can measure what's going on. There were mutations, by the way. There was some adaptation. There were some beneficial mutations happening, but it wasn't enough to stop extinction. And these two other curves were two other influenza outbreaks, and they similarly underwent entropic decay. They didn't go extinct yet, but they're clearly headed that way. So we do have some biological data.
Okay.
Well,
thank you.
It's true that it's largely theoretical, but there's now growing biological data.
Thank you.
Yeah. My personal view is a Christian view, and we are dying people in a dying world. We all know we're dying people, and we're dying by genetic entropy. It's accumulation of mutations, which is why everybody in this room is more mutant you are today than you were yesterday. Our hope is not in this body. Our hope is not Mother Earth. Our hope is in heaven. That's a traditional biblical perspective. I think it matches the data disturbingly well. I do not take genetic entropy lightly because I know that it causes so much suffering and so much death, but I see it as a reality. And so that's why I've been pursuing this research.